Hey folks, I'm Mike. Do you hate ads? I hate ads. You know what I like? Patreon.com/Inkdependence. It keeps this blog ad-free. Hello folks, and welcome to Inkdependence.com. I'm Mike, and this is Robert Oster's Carolina Blue. This is exclusively available at carolinapenco.com, and Jonathan Brooks at Carolina Penco is nice enough to send out a bottle of this ink for me. So let's take a look at this cool blue. Robert Oster is definitely, I think, the king of blues, and this is a very nice blue. Carolina Penco is not North Carolina, that is South Carolina, and so this is not that super light Tar Heel blue that you might have been expecting, but it is nonetheless a very nice blue. So here it is on some Rhodia. This is my normal Rhodia 80 grams per square meter paper. This is again a coated paper, and so it's going to look different than it will if you use it on some of your uncoated papers. I'll have a couple of those here to show you in a sec. So this is the blue you end up with, which can be either very dark or quite light, depending upon how your pen performs and what kind of nib you've got going on and that sort of thing. So this is, I say, medium or maybe a medium dry sort of ink, and I've had this in two pens. You can see there's a drastic difference between these two nibs and how they perform. So on the top one, this one, which is most of the header bits and the super dark parts of this this review, and that is this. It's a very cool pen that I just picked up in Baltimore, and this is a Carolina Penco Charleston. I'll probably do a review on Charlestons here in a little bit. I've got a couple of these. And this has a broad Yovo nib in it, and it's quite a wet broad nib, actually. So that's why you see such a difference here between these two nib styles and the two lines here. The other pen is a Franklin-Christoph Model 31, and this is in an Alumilite that Jonathan Brooks made for them. This is sort of a limited run a year or so ago, and this has a broad sig, but this is actually a fairly dry broad sig. It's not wet at all. Some of my broad sigs are wet, some of them are medium. This one's very kind of on the dry side. So you end up with a much different character in your ink here, and that's why I decided to use these two together, besides the fact that they're both Brooks materials. So I thought that was apropos. You can pick this ink up in the normal what is this? What size is this bottle? I can't even find it. Yeah, 50 mil? Yeah, 50 mil bottle, and it's $17 over at carolinapenco.com. It is in stock as of when I'm making this video. I'm not sure what the supplies are on this thing, but I don't think it's limited. I think they'll keep selling it. So if you like what you see here, go over to Carolina Penco and drop them a line. You can see here it says shading and mild sheen. It really depends on your paper and your nib combination. This one in particular looks very different depending on what you've got going on. So if you look up here in this very dark splotch, you can probably see some sheen. There's like a dark reddish sheen sort of in there, but not really any place else, I don't think. Maybe up in here you'll see some, maybe in that 2, but not really a lot of sheen on this one. This one is more of a shader than a sheener, and you can actually see that shading in both of these writing samples. So here on the, let's see, I get something pointy. This is pointy. Here on the Y's and the A's and these places where I did a double loop or that sort of thing, this A, you get more shading, I think. Not a whole lot of sheen, maybe some in here-ish, and you get a fair amount of shading here with this very wet broad as well. I forgot to put a period at the end of the sentence. Well, let's fix that. More character. Period. So any hoozle, I think it's a pretty cool ink, although it is a little bit drier than I prefer, and I think you ought to keep this one in a wet or maybe sort of like a medium wet nib. I think actually somewhere in between these is the perfect character for this ink. This one looks a little too dark maybe, and this one's a little bit too light. So if you have just like a dead-on medium nib, I think this would be better, medium flow anyway, than the dry nib or the wet nib. I think this looks better than this, but I think something in the middle would give you a better character, quite honestly. Let's go ahead and do, let's look at it how it does on the 20-pound paper. I see there's mild bleed here, and you do get a little bit of that. That's here. Let me get this off underneath it. This is the top line. This is that very wet broad nib. You see you actually get a little bit of like a couple of feathers here and there, maybe a little bit of spread perhaps, but again, very wet nib. This one down here is that Franklin-Christoph 31. I think it looks better here than it does on the Rhodia with this nib. It's one of those things about paper and pens and ink. Don't forget it's a triumvirate, and each part does its own thing. And then on the back, you can see there's definitely a little bit of bleed here, but even with this wet nib, not a lot of bleed compared to some other things. And then down here at this drier nib, just a couple of little spots peeking through, but you could definitely use this back side of the paper with no problem, I think, with that SIG. So keep that in mind. Your nib, your paper, your ink, all those things count. As far as other papers I've had it on, I've had it in this currently inked book, of course. This is my wheat straw paper, and there we go. Here are these two. So here's first the 31, and you can see there's actually a little bit of sheen right in here. You get a little bit of sheen, you get a little bit of shading. Same thing over here, although I think actually on this paper, I think I like the broad more. Again, just really depends on your paper and your pen. This is an ink that is variable, which is pretty cool. All right, it could be a lot of things depending on what you put it in and what you use it on. And actually here in the Tomoe River ink journal, I've only got the one sample. I didn't write down the other pen in here, and I don't really know why, but I was looking back through here and I can't find it. So I guess I just didn't put it in here and record it, but you know, whatever. There's the franklin-christoph broad SIG. And on this Tomoe River, you actually get a really nice looking ink. I think it probably looks best on this Tomoe River of any of the others. Because even with the broad SIG, you get a good amount of character, you get a little bit of sheen, you get a little bit of shading, you get a good color, so it looks really good on this paper. So, like I said, very variable ink, really interesting stuff. All right, let's go ahead and do our water test. I forgot to write water test. I forgot a couple of things here. Water test ST, there we go. All right. Okay, let's put some water on the subject here. Give it a little bit of a shimmy. There we go. Yeah, there's gonna get a lot of blue coming off here, I think. Gonna get a fair amount of blue coming off this page. We'll see if there's anything left over. I'm not really expecting much, honestly, but you never know what you're gonna find. Okay, let's blot it away. Remember, if you're trying to save your writing at all, blot, don't scrub. All right, you actually get a little bit left over. Not a ton. You get a bunch more blue left over here on the paper towel than you do on the paper, I think. But you could probably make that out if you had to, but I'm not going to say it's water resistant. There just happens to be a little bit left. And again, your results might be different if you use it on a paper that actually absorbs the ink better than the Rhodia does. This is a coated paper, that's why you don't have to worry about it going through the back. Even up here where I just put a bunch of ink down. All right. If you go over to Instagram, you'll probably see this video somewhere. All right. Here is the chromatography for Robert Oster's Carolina Blue. You can see here. This is the reason I wasn't expecting there to be a whole lot left when the water hit it, because this is where that ink started, and there's just there's not really much left. There's a couple little pockets, which is interesting, but I think that's probably just due to the weave of this coffee filter. It's a little bit inconsistent here, perhaps. But just like the last Robert Oster we looked at, the Hippo Noto, not much variation going on here. It's just kind of blue all the way up, which is interesting. A lot of times in blues you find all kinds of interesting colors, or at least a top band of super bright blue or something like that, but not here. This is a very sort of, I'm going to say monochrome ink, just all blue. All right, let's look at a bunch of color comparisons. Actually, it's not going to be a ton this time because this is a very interesting blue, and I just did not have very many that were close. So this is what it looks like on a Colodex card. Here is one that's I think fairly close, and this is Diamine's Majestic Blue, which is a really nice blue all on its own. Let's see, what will we put next to that? We'll put let's put this one over here. This is Kobe number 58, which is Hyogo Canal Blue, which is fairly close, but I think a good deal lighter than the Carolina Blue. Majestic Blue, I think, is actually darker than it usually appears here, but it's got a lot more sheen. Majestic Blue is a hella sheener, and this one's got a fair amount of sheen in it as well, which I think is pretty cool, but not as much in the Carolina Blue itself. That's got a little bit of a hint of sheen maybe, but not much. All right. Here's one that you can't really get your hands on right now, but if you can get your hands on, I say do it. This is KWZ's Hawaii Blue, which I think is a beautiful blue, and this was a Hippo Noto exclusive that appears to be sold out. I don't know if she's getting more of this, but Hawaii Blue is very cool, and they're kind of close. I think Hawaii Blue is actually more consistent than Carolina Blue in terms of its color depth. This one you get more shading, I think, than you do with Hawaii Blue, really. And then this is actually the very first Robert Oster ink that I used. And this is Robert Oster's School Blue, which is supposed to be sort of a bog standard blue that everybody would use in school and is not supposed to be exciting. But I actually quite like this one. 2016 was the first time I used this. Only like 3 years worth of Robert Oster stuff. This dude has a million colors and they're all real cool. But King of Blues. I have a lot of Robert Oster blues, and I think this one's the closest. It doesn't get as dark as Carolina Blue, and I don't think it gets as light. This one goes both directions, and this one I think is just more. It's more consistent, perhaps, kind of like the Hawaii Blue. It's just it's going to be that color, but you do get more sheen up in here, I think. And then lastly, this is one you don't see all that often, but it's another Aussie ink, and that is Blackstone's Barrier Reef Blue, which is a pretty cool ink on its own. It is a heavy sheener, and it is kind of thick. I'm not really sure which of these I prefer, if I'm honest. You get more sheen here, but both of them tend to run just a skosh dry. So, keep that in mind when you're using these blues. Maybe that's just something endemic to the kinds of dyes that are used in these guys to get this color. I don't think School Blue was all that dry, and Hawaii wasn't, but that's a whole different continent, this Hawaii Blue. Yeah, a little bit on the dry side, perhaps, these. So, keep that in mind. All right. So that has been Robert Oster's Carolina Blue. This is exclusive to the Carolina Pen Company. Go over to carolinapincompany.com where you can purchase this for $17. Tell Jonathan I said hi, and I'll see y'all later. Peace out.